I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Are you ready to win at the game of life? Well, throw out that rulebook and get down to the business of being the best and most authentic version of you. Welcome to the Human Design Podcast. We're changing the rules around success, abundance, purpose, love, and life, where we're creating a planet where everyone can thrive in a world that loves and supports each other. I'm your host, Emma Dunwoody, a qualified master coach, human design expert, podcaster, and entrepreneur that is living the life of my dreams, breaking all the rules while doing it, making a huge impact, and living my design and manifesting miracles on the daily. Join me as I break down and simplify everything you need to live in alignment with your human design, teach you how to recondition your unconscious mind for greatness, and to take back your power so you can manifest your heaven on earth and serve the rest of the planet at the same time. It's time to give up the fear and step into your highest potential, to reach for the stars, to know and live your greatness. It's what you deserve, and it's what the planet really needs from you. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. If you use human design in your business in any way, stop what you're doing because you're going to want to hear this. I want to tell you about something we use in this business that has been responsible for bringing in nearly 25,000 new leads and over 6 figures in revenue in a completely automated and passive way. It's not too good to be true, so stay tuned. That incredible thing is the Body Graph Chart software. This is the total tool that allows us to put a human design chart generated on our website so we don't have to send people to another website for their chart. The best part is we can offer our customers the information we want them to have. If you know me, you know I have a different take on human design, and I want to make sure that the language is empowering, useful, and actionable. With Body Graph Chart, we can customize everything from the reading reports, chart links, and follow-up emails to make sure that they contain the information written and curated by me, so I know each person is in good hands. As for the tech, that's totally Taylor's thing, but from what she tells me, it's super easy to use and set up, and their customer service is incredibly helpful. It's really affordable as well, especially because you get a 50% off for 1 year as a listener of this podcast. Just visit the link in the show notes and use the code Human Design Podcast, all lowercase. It's by far one of the biggest investments in our business and gives us powerful automation technology that allows us to focus on the bigger picture. I cannot recommend it enough. Go check out the show notes for all the details. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Well, on today's episode, I have a beautiful human being that I was so lucky enough to be on her podcast when I was adventuring in London recently for my book launch. And now I get to talk to her all about her story. So, Angela Foster, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Emma. It's so great to be here. Yeah, I absolutely loved our conversation, and so did my audience. It was amazing. It was transformational. So yeah, it's great to be here with you today.
I am so excited to talk about all the topics that you cover. I feel like you and I are kindred spirits. I think there's a lot of similarity in our stories, and we've kind of taken it similar but different directions. So I'm really excited to talk about that. For those of you listening out there, I just want to let you know that Angela is a 3/6 sacral generator, and she's the cross of laws. And also just to say, you just have to check out her podcast, which is High Performance Health Podcast. It's just freaking brilliant. I was just listening to it before. So I love to start with this moment, this dark night of the soul, this moment in time that we all experience, especially those of us that have taken on this mission in our lives to help other people learn something that we've learned, possibly the hard way, in a much easier way. And we start with this dark night of the soul, that invitation into our purpose, that journey that takes us on this path to become, the Angela Foster that's sitting in front of me today. So can you tell me a little bit about that journey? Because I know it's been pretty hectic from dark night of the soul to the human that's sitting before me.
It has been a little hectic. And I actually remember you saying on my podcast about how chaos was in my chart. And I guess
Yeah.
that's one way to describe it, as being chaotic, right?
Yeah.
That moment for me happened when I ended up in hospital with double pneumonia, really fighting for my life. I was neutropenic. My white blood cell count was so low. And that was the defining moment. And the reason it was such an important moment for me is that it was after struggling with years of clinical depression, which had started as postnatal depression after my first child. And then it happened with all three of my children. And it had gotten so bad after I had my daughter that 2 years later, I was really, really struggling. The medications weren't working. I was having so much therapy. And all I could think about was how I just wanted to turn the thoughts in my head off. I
Yeah.
couldn't see a way through. And I'd effectively, Emma, I'd created this prison in my own mind. And I was really, and the reason I describe it as a prison is because I loved and adored my children and husband, and I wanted to be there for them, but I couldn't be with myself. And so I felt trapped because I didn't want to be that person, that mum who took her own life and my children were left knowing that. And so I didn't know what to do. And I do feel like when we focus on something enough, we can attract things towards us. And so my health then took a toll on my health. And ultimately, the kids got a flu. I picked it up, and then it deteriorated, and it got worse and worse. And they were treating me initially at home with pneumonia, and then I got called to the hospital after a chest X-ray, saying, "Can you come urgently? We need to have a look." And when I was in there, they kept looking and talking about my lymph glands. And, after a while, I was there, I had a raging fever. I knew I had pneumonia. And I was like, why do you keep talking about my lymph glands? It feels like you might be saying there's something more. It feels like, you might be saying I've got something like lung cancer. And that's when they said to me, look, it's hard to say you don't without a CT scan. So I was rushed for this CT scan. And I walked back into the doctor's office. And before I could even sit down, he said to me, it's worse than I thought. And
Wow.
I remember those words, just, and it was just such a shock. And he said, I'm admitting you. And I was like, okay, but my kids are at school. I need to just go pick them up. I'll come back. And he was like, I don't think you understand. Like the pneumonia spread across your lungs. And I don't honestly know how you're standing here, how you're breathing. But what I can tell you is it's likely to be quite rapid. And they thought they would have to intubate me. It didn't turn out. I didn't have to in the end. And this is what was so transformational and really changed my entire ethos around health and vitality. Because when I was then admitted, it hit me hard. I suddenly couldn't say goodbye to my kids. I couldn't tell them that mummy wasn't going to be coming home tonight or
Oh
the
my
next night.
goodness.
And I was lying there in hospital. And I remember they'd come to visit me. And I was looking at photos on my phone. And I felt this deep and profound sense of love. And it was like a waking up of like, what are you doing? You've got to get out of here. Like there's a real possibility you won't. And what's so crazy is that in that moment when I made a decision, which is what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, right?
Yeah.
It was a decision to get well for my kids and husband. Within 48 hours, my blood work started to change and my white blood cell count
Wow.
started to rise. And, because I had viral and bacterial pneumonia, the antibiotics were going to go so far with the bacterial infection, but really we were relying on my immune system. And the turnaround was just nothing short of transformational. And I just live in gratitude to that day.
Wow. What do you think turned it around? I mean, I've got head to toe goosebumps. I just think it's beautiful. I love that, that instantaneous response, What do you think turned it around?
I think it was that feeling. I've had conversations with quite a few people, particularly like Dr. Patrick Porter, who's the head of who's part of Quantum University and runs the company BrainTap, and he was saying to me how in that moment when you feel that love, he was like the light energy, your biofield, the light energy that would have been coming from your body, and the upgrade that would have occurred in your cells. It was incredible. But to actually see that on my blood work. And so, the journey that they thought I would go on, which was, preparing a bed in intensive care and taking me down that road of being intubated, actually, I started to heal and I didn't need that. Yes, I had all the oxygen and the drips and everything the antibiotics to get me there, but I never had to go down that path that they originally thought. And then they did a CT scan afterwards and they were expecting damage. And actually there was a little bit of damage in the very deep part of my lungs and I had infection induced asthma. But for the most part, I healed. But you know,
Wow.
that's that's when the real journey began, right? Because I actually had to really heal myself. And it was after that, because I'd been practicing as a corporate lawyer for many years. And so I had, you know, corporate law in London. You totally disrespect everything I talk about, right? Sleep. No, you're going to pull all nighters, work weekends, do everything to get the deal done. So
Yeah.
I think there was this background of adrenal exhaustion when I had my children. I'd had quite a lot of hormonal problems, things like endometriosis and surgery. And so I think, you know, after 3 C-sections, there's a lot of reasons why I think I kind of experienced that postnatal depression, but ultimately it became pretty entrenched. And yeah, that's that. Then the real journey began after that.
You know, I wonder with the postnatal depression, you know, from a behavioral perspective, from a personal perspective, and from a human design perspective, that identity shift from corporate lawyer to mother, you know, like that is something that I think so many women really struggle with. I know when I transitioned out of an advertising career and, you know, I tried something in between that and being a mum, but I felt lost. I felt so like, who am I? And as a generator, and I'm a manifesting generator, we're literally put on this planet to do the work that lights us up. And I feel like it's just that extra weight that perhaps was on your shoulder, like this big identity shift, and the your unconscious mind and your body just wasn't keeping up with the change.
I think that's absolutely right. I think, you know, for all I'd ever known as a child was I want to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And when I realized, interestingly, I made partnership at the firm when I was 8 months pregnant with my first son. And then I was 3 months pregnant when I was due to go back on
Wow.
maternity leave. So it was all happening very, very quickly. And I think that made a decision to take a break. And I suddenly realized there was more to life than corporate law. But it
Mm.
did, like looking back, I can see how much that affected my identity because suddenly it was, who am I, right, without this? And I think that's why you and I were so aligned on this, right? We talk about finding your purpose and your inner being because I didn't know who I was without that. And I think that contributed to my mental health.
Yeah, and I think it's something that so many women really wrestle with because I was the same. Like I was coming out of advertising and I knew I didn't want to be there. I knew that, yes, it was something that I'd kind of dreamed of. Like I thought I was always going to climb the corporate ladder and, you know, be in a senior management position, just like both my parents. But to actually be hit so hard with this transition of like, I didn't even want to be that. Why am I so upset about not being that anymore? And I think that a lot of women just don't see it coming. I think a lot of men don't see it coming as well when there's a big shift in their identity.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, you know, what I've noticed as well is that another shift comes. I don't know if you found this in your 40s as women, around that sort of perimenopausal time, which I absolutely love to reframe as an opportunity, right? Because it's an opportunity to really get to know yourself. And you're being given these signs around your health as well, where you can actually look a little bit deeper and think, you know, where do I need to do a little bit more work to optimize, whether that's your emotional, spiritual, physical, or mental health, you know? But I do see that, and I think it comes up for many women again. And I think that it's a time that we should be addressing that.
Yeah, look, I really agree. And from a human design perspective, we actually talk about we've got our Uranus opposition, which is around our early 40s. And this is this time of internal revolution. So, where we often, you know, modern day psychology calls it the midlife crisis. So, it's men and women. Um, and this is often a time that women are like, okay, I need to go and find myself. So, a man, you know, like that whole stereotype of buying a fast car and leaving your husband or wife, you know. Um, and then I think you're right. We have this thing at 50 that's called our Chiron return. And I think that this is a time where, and both of these moments in time, we either can really lose ourselves and be scared of the change, or like you said, like it's a time of opportunity. And I'd really love to talk about perimenopause and menopause because it was something for me that I did not see coming. I went through menopause really early, and I'd never been afraid of aging. You know, none wasn't even on my radar. And then all of a sudden, it hit me, and I started really worrying about getting physically older, worrying that I was going to be like an old lady, and you know, my bone density and like all of this stuff. And it really hit me. And there's a part of me that it took a long time for me to realize that I was just plugged into the collective consciousness. These weren't even my beliefs because they felt so foreign. On some level, I think I needed to heal things that were within me, but this journey for me has been fascinating because I felt myself just get plugged into the collective consciousness of fear. So I would love to hear from your perspective of opportunity. As women sort of enter this time, how can they be reframing menopause as, okay, this is actually a great opportunity? And what do I need to know as I navigate through this time? Because it's not something that just happens overnight. This is a long journey that we go through. So how can we kind of be in the power seat as we manage or negotiate this change?
I love that question. I love that question because I think it is, as you say, it's such a powerful reframe to think of it as an opportunity. And I think if we can see it that way, because it's a time of our lives where we're saying, I think one of the things that women sort of butt up a little bit against, right, is it becomes very apparent that you're losing your fertility. There's no
Yeah.
way around that, right? And I think that's
It's
what makes
really
you feel.
confronting. It's really confronting, and you
It's
don't see
really
it coming. Well,
confronting.
I didn't see it coming. It was very confronting.
Really confronting. And what's interesting about it, right, is it doesn't matter whether you decided not to have children or whether you feel you've completed your family, it's still confronting because there's
Yep.
something that's being taken, effectively, it feels like it's being taken away from you. I think what's really reassuring is that when we look at the research, and Dr. Lisa Mosconi has done a lot of research on this about women's brains and how they change, is the female brain goes through an upgrade at three significant periods of their life. The first is during puberty. The second is during pregnancy, which is when we develop a greater what's known as theory of mind. That's how we
Wow.
understand intuitively that, our baby needs something before it can speak to us. And that we have that bond that in a way men don't quite have the same, right? We just know that child's needs. And then we get another upgrade in perimenopause as we make that transition. And women post-menopause, and actually this part is true of both men and women, when you look at the happiness curve, right? Actually, the lowest point of happiness is in our mid-40s, around that time. And then the trend goes up and we just get happier and happier. And, as Lisa Mosconi said, women post-menopause tend to give, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this, am I?
Go for it.
Tend to give less fucks. And so they feel happier, but they're also more empathetic than ever before. So the good news is good times are coming. However, it's disruptive. It's the messy middle. Do you know what I mean? And I think this
Yeah.
is the hard part because as progesterone starts to decline initially, this makes us feel more anxious. I don't think that's helpful, right? That's contributing. And so all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, like, why are these tiny problems that used to not bother me at all like a massive deal? I'm almost having a panic attack in relation to them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember being just a little bit crazy.
Mm.
I was already an emotional, like I'm an emotional authority, and I was already an emotional person. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is a lot. This is a lot. But post menopause, I'm like, wow, my emotional highs and lows are nowhere near what they used to be. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So your testimony to that, right? That it is amazing. And hopefully that reassures a lot of women who are listening to this and also men, right? Because the thing is about menopause is it impacts every single one of us because, men have partners in their lives or they have sisters, they have people that are going through this or friends. And I think to know that is so reassuring. But in the middle, we've got to kind of get through that messy middle, right? And navigate it in a way that I think should be part of a journey of self-discovery and finding ourselves, because I think you've talked about this a lot, Emma, about how, the first part of your life, you're trying new things, right? There's a sense of adventure and you're testing things and you're growing, and all of that. But then as we move through this middle period, it's a journey of self-discovery and finding out who we truly are and what matters the most to us. And that's why with our, clients and program members, we spend so much time on their purpose, their goals, their values, really to get them all in sync because life just feels so much more intuitive and we can tap into that side of our femininity, as we go through it. But I think being aware of and we can talk about these if you want to, some of the things that happen in terms of physically, like you mentioned, bone density. We talked about anxiety, sleep. These things can be addressed through healthy lifestyle and behaviors. So I'm happy to go whichever
Yeah,
direction you want with it.
I would love to talk a bit about that. I really want to dive into some of the biohack stuff too, because I'm fascinated with that. But the one thing I hear a lot about, or at least from women premenopausal, even through the other side, is sleep. That was the thing. I've always been a great sleeper. And that was the thing that I found most challenging going through menopause for me. And on the other side of it, I feel like my sleep is now just starting to get really, really good and consistent and deep and all of those things again. So maybe there was contributing factors. I split up with my husband over a year ago. So maybe the fact that I've got my bed to myself now and all of those things, that's contributing. But I'd love you to talk about, in fact, I'm going to go one step further, because when I went through menopause, the thing that I was really conscious of is that because I was so deep in all of my subconscious reprogramming, I was really deep in understanding my behavior. And I kind of made this choice and this intention and this declaration that I'm going to move through it with as little fuss and, like, what's the word? Like, interruption as possible. Now, I don't know whether I was just lucky or the work that I did on my mindset had a massive impact, because I actually didn't, it wasn't a really terrible experience for me. I did experience a lot of hot and cold flushes, but I always have my entire life. So it was just like more of them than normal. And the sleep thing. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about that, because I know that the symptoms of menopause, they just vary so much. Is it possible that if we tune in our mindset, if we are more connected, because of course I was a lot more connected spiritually by that stage, like if we're doing all of this work, is this going to improve the like the symptoms and side effects then that we experience as we go through it?
100% it will improve it. Yeah, absolutely. And I think because the link with stress is so high. So we know that like a few things are happening. So as those hormones, initially what happens, if I sort of describe for people, is progesterone starts to drop. And that does impact our sleep, and that can impact our stress levels and that resiliency. Because I don't know about you, but I find, and with the women I speak to, is what they're experiencing is they just feel less resilient than they were before. And that's like progesterone starts to, I always think of like estrogen's like the queen and progesterone's like the princess, right? She needs a little bit more teasing in. And if you're in a very stressful position, stressful job, you're going through a breakup, things like that, your adrenals are busy producing lots of cortisol. And we're having an increase in cortisol anyway. So there's increased inflammation as you go through perimenopause. There's increased cortisol. We have less insulin sensitivity. We have more oxidative stress. So there's a lot going on. And so if we can correct that through lifestyle behaviors, we can feel a lot better. But getting to know ourselves and focusing on that spiritual component and practices like meditation, yoga, mindfulness, journaling, right? Journaling is just such an amazing way, isn't it? And it's like a portal into our soul.
Yeah.
Those things can help just bring that sense of calm. And, you know, one of the metrics we look at a lot is heart rate variability, because that tells us it's a very non-invasive way of getting a snapshot of how that person, what that person's level of adaptability and resiliency is. And we see that with aging, heart rate variability starts to drop as well. I can explain what that is for people.
Yeah, I think that's great, because I didn't understand it until I've taken a bit of a break now, but I was wearing my Aura ring and really paying attention to that, because it's a really good indicator of longevity, isn't it?
It is helpful for longevity. Yeah, absolutely. And it's looking at, because partly it's driven by fitness. So heart rate variability is the interbeat variability. So if your heart, let's say the average heart beats at 60 beats per minute, we wouldn't expect that to be like a metronome. It's not going to be one beat every second. In fact, there's a lot of interbeat variation. And it's that variability that indicates we've got really good communication between our sympathetic part of our nervous system, right, which is the kind of go system, and can be associated with the fight or flight, and then the parasympathetic nervous system. And so if they're communicating well, then we have, and we can switch, right? So we can be in that situation where we're responding, we're dealing with something high pressure, but then we can let go and we can relax and not have that endless rumination, right? Which I think is what you were talking about, that you were going to do it with minimal interruptions and really work on your own kind of subconscious mind and things. So then we're going to have more capacity, more adaptability, and we will naturally be more resilient. So it's a great metric to measure, because you can see what's stressing me And where do I need to put in more time for recovery? And this again is something with women going through that stage of life, is that we need a bit more recovery. We actually need a stronger stimulus in terms of exercise, but we need more recovery. And the thing is, what I've found is actually it's the emotional stress a lot of the time, and the stress of life, because women in that period have been called now the sandwich generation, which is quite new because we're dealing with more stress than ever before. We've got children, sometimes young children, if we've had them a bit later, sometimes teenagers, and then aging parents, because we have an aging population who were of the era, a lot of them, of, there's a pill for every ill. And so unfortunately, they're on multiple medications with multiple things going on for them. And we're having to look to them and look after them. And then they have their careers and things going on themselves. So it's that sandwich effect that I think is increasing that stress.
Yeah, that sounds way too familiar. Yes, that was me. Can you talk a little bit about recovery? I think this is something that it was funny. There's a couple of things that I want to respond to, but this recovery piece, I think there's so much research on, how the male body recovers, and we just take it on as, well, that's the same for us. And I was at a retreat actually, and there was this guy talking about recovery, and I remember I'm saying to him, like, honestly, I love an ice bath, but I got to tell you, half the time I'm pretty confident this is not creating recovery. It's doing, it's stressing me out more. And I'm a human, like, I love it. I don't love getting in it. I don't love sitting in it, but I love how I feel after it. So I'd really love you to talk about, like, what is recovery? What specifically can we be doing to give our body the recovery it needs?
Such a great question. And on the ice bath thing, what's interesting is the research that's coming out is just women, we don't need it as cold. That's the key point. So it doesn't even have to be an ice bath. A cold bath helps to reduce inflammation. The key thing that you're looking for is, am I starting to shiver? And women will actually start to shiver at higher temperatures than men. So we don't have to plunge quite as cold as
Oh,
men.
I love that, because I can't get my feet in. I find it really uncomfortable, yet I can get in a cold ocean. Like, I love getting in the ocean. That's easy. That's fascinating. I love that.
Yeah. And in the ocean, I mean, it's lovely, isn't it? Because you've got that grounding effect as well, right? From the Earth's natural negative ions, So, but yeah, in terms of recovery, there are so many things that you can do. And I think really as women, it's about embracing that female side, okay? Because we're going into our feminine when we're thinking about recovery. It's, as you know, it's the masculine energy that's driving us to achieve things and putting boundaries and things like that, which is all really helpful. But we don't want to be too much into it. And I think sometimes, as you say, there's a lot of male influencers who are doing incredible work, but things like the cold bath, ice bath, it doesn't necessarily need to be an ice bath. So I think it's about figuring out what really resonates with you. And what we see is that when women are aligned with their values and purpose and doing things that they love and having that creative expression, if you like, we see their heart rate variability go up. So what happens is we put monitors on our clients and program members, and they'll do assessments for, say, 3 days or 5 days and get them to tag events. And so like an example I can give you is a mum who we have who she's got 5 children. Now, you would think that getting 5 children ready for school in the morning is going to be a massive stress. But it's so in alignment with where she wants to be. Having breakfast for them really fills her cup. She's in that heart space and she loves it.
I'm a bit jealous of her, because I've always wished I felt that way, but that is not me.
Is it like those women that float through pregnancy? I always looked at those and thinking, why do I not just sort of float through pregnancy and just instead I just feel sick all the time and just, yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
I know, right? But it's that piece, like we talk about a friend of mine who is a generator. And so us generators, manifesting generators, we're on the planet to do the work we love. So often we can wrestle with being a mum because there's this part of us that's really driven to work. Yet this friend of mine who has 5 children, being a mum is the work she's on the planet to do. And I'm like, you just make it all look so easy. So I imagine she'd be the same as your client, like, it doesn't feel hard or stressful to her.
Yes, she loves it. Exactly. And so what we would see then is that her heart rate variability in moments like that would go up even higher than in sleep, which shows you that
Wow.
actually is recovery for her, right? She's doing what she loves. And I think this is where I would encourage people to think is, maybe I don't actually have to make extra time, because you don't necessarily have extra time. What if we switched it the other way and it's like, what do I love to do? What feels intuitively right for me, and go with that, because that is such a valuable piece of recovery that isn't requiring anything extra of you. In fact, it's just asking us to do what we love. And for some people, yes, that's being with their children. For other people, it'll be time alone, right?
Yeah.
And just giving yourself that space.
Oh, I
And
love that.
it's just nice. And I think we don't give ourselves permission, do we? Often
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah. I think you're so right. So right. And it makes me think like one of the things that I do, and I hadn't thought about it as recovery. And sometimes I'm like, maybe I do too much exercise, but I walk a lot and I also ride my horse. So I have a young dressage horse, and I even call him my four-legged therapist. So, because it always feels like recovery. He's just the best. So I'm going to like chalk that up to that's helping me recover.
And I'm sure it is, because horses are incredible, right? Just that
Yeah.
relationship with a horse is really, really magical. And so, it would be interesting what we would see. Obviously, if you're looking at exercise, when we see heart rate increase, then heart rate variability naturally goes down, because they have this inverse relationship. But exercise is an amazing tool as well for increasing the health of your heart and improving metrics like heart rate variability. So yes, it is something that goes down with age, but we can, just like with all things longevity based, we can bring in practices that actually enhance us and lower our biological age. There are other things as well, just doing like simple breathing exercises. Our breath is really the only kind of scientifically proven way into accessing that parasympathetic nervous system. That also will improve heart rate variability. And there's different breathing exercises people can do. And again, if you're someone who's like got that hoppy brain, right, and you feel like I can't meditate, I can't have that sense of stillness yet, the breath is an amazing segue into that. And it gives you something to actually do, that you can
Yeah.
focus on as well. It's kind of like your anchor. So that's also really good.
I love that. I want to talk about you said three beautiful magical words: lower biological age. This is something that I am fascinated with. I have been for quite a long time, and I would really love to really let's kick off with what does that actually mean, and then let's start to talk about. I mean, I take a bunch of supplements, but I mean, I take NMN every single day. Um, I am have actually I want to talk to you about peptides because I gave peptides a go and they were really great as well. So let's first talk about this understanding like what is our biological age versus our chronological age. That's the correct terminology, right?
Yes, yeah. So chronological. So I mostly actually come at this from a more natural perspective. There are some supplements, but I think that there's so much we can do, and exercises we can come onto is such an incredible lever,
Love it.
that we can sort of explain how that works as well. But when we're looking at, so chronological age is our chronological age, right? We know how old we are, according to our date of birth. Looking at biological age is looking at how quickly am I aging in comparison to my chronological age, because people can age faster than their chronological age, or about the same time, or actually less. They're aging more slowly, right? And ultimately, I think that's where we all want to arrive at, because it's about
Absolutely.
health span, isn't it? We don't want to get old and and be struggling. We want to kind of, and Dr. Peter Attia talks about this, right? So what we see at the moment is we unfortunately see this very long period of ill health at the end of our lives. And so what he's trying to do is to square off that curve, right? So if we can go healthy, 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 and then a drop, that's so much better than healthy and then gradual decline, 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 which doesn't feel nice. And so really lowering your biological age, there are many markers that you can look at. I think the most important thing, first of all, is to look at your blood work on at least an annual basis, if not semi-annual, to see what's going on. And looking at things like how well your insulin sensitivity is, your fasting glucose, your lipid markers, lots of different things. Looking at your liver function, all of those things are really, really important. And then what we see is there are also biological age tests that are coming out, looking at different things. So some of them will look at what's known as the methylation age. Others look at glycans, and these are related to inflammation and kind of immune health. And you can be significantly younger according to any one of those markers. But the key thing is, are you putting in place the right lifestyle habits and behaviors that effectively keep you young? because we don't have to age as rapidly if we don't want to. And I think that's what's becoming really apparent. So we can talk about some of those things if you want to.
Yeah, please, please.
So I think the Anti-Aging Institute, I think in America said, Robert Butler, that if exercise was a pill, everyone would take it. So that's why I'm such a massive, massive fan of exercise. I do think with exercise, so there's very specific things that you should be doing if you want to age well. And one of them we touched on earlier when you were talking about perimenopause, and this is true for men and women, but particularly with women as they go through menopause, is bone density. So if we're not looking after our bone density, and we do see that big drop off with women, but we also want to look after our muscle health. So we know that every decade we lose about 3 to 8% of our muscle mass. So if we're not training for strength and using resistance training, we're not going to be anywhere close to as strong. Now, you might think, well, do I need to be that strong? It's also important because it's your muscle mass that's looking after your metabolism and that insulin sensitivity. So it's so
Wow.
important. So people who are finding that they're struggling, controlling their blood glucose as effectively, for example, maybe they're getting some weight gain. That's another common thing for women in perimenopause. And we see it's not just so much overall weight gain everywhere, but it's this migration of weight to the abdominal area, which is where men traditionally hold it. And that, unfortunately, can include visceral fat, right, which is fat around the organs. So by actually doing resistance training, we're improving our strength and muscle mass, and that helps look after our metabolic health. And it gives us more flexibility, Emma, because who wants to be on a restrictive diet? I certainly don't. Do you know
Oh
what I mean?
God, me neither. I can't, and I'm hopeless at it. And I actually think I'm stronger now than I have been, because going through menopause early, I just became so conscious of it. And I've actually had my trainers on the podcast, but I tell you what, these girls pound me. But I've got to be, I think I'm stronger than I have been. And we have this really cool hike where I live called the Lighthouse, and it's about 6.5 kilometers. And I do it most mornings. And there's a lot of stairs on the way down. And if I do it with my kids or friends that are younger, and I'm like running down the stairs, and they're all like, Mom, what are you doing? Like, how come you go down the stairs so quickly? I'm like, bone density, people, bone density. Like, because don't we have to shock our bones, make sure that they're
Yeah.
getting high impact?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do. We do. And we want to resist, right? And actually going downstairs is harder. If you look at the elderly, it's harder than going upstairs because of that deceleration. So balance is really, really important because you don't want to fall in the first place. But then if you do fall, and the other thing as well about falling and protecting longevity is we lose those fast twitch muscle fibers much more quickly than the slow twitch muscle fibers, which are more endurance based, right? So you've noticed the older you get, you can still walk for very long periods of time. But if I say, let's go sprint, let's run for the bus, it's so much harder than when we were younger. And that's because of that decline in fast twitch muscle fibers. But if you're about to fall, right, you trip, what are you going to use? Those fast twitch fibers to right yourself and get yourself back on track. And that's why your training needs to be very specific with aging so that you're targeting your strength and muscle mass, your balance, but also you're doing some speed and power work in the form of kind of sprints. And these could be sprints on a bike just to help those fast twitch muscle fibers. But also importantly, it helps your VO2 max, which is your aerobic capacity. And by doing the sprints, it upgrades your mitochondria. So the other thing that we
Wow.
do with aging is, and the mitochondria are the energy powerhouses of our cells. So what we see is a decline in energy. Again, this is something that women, particularly in perimenopause, struggle with because at that period of our lives, what we see, it's so unfortunate what happens, I think, for women, but such an opportunity, right? Let's reframe this as an opportunity because if your
Yeah.
energy is going down, then start thinking about your mitochondria because we see less DNA mitochondrial replication and less density. So we've got less number and less quality, right? That's happening. One of the best ways to upgrade your mitochondria is to do some sprint training because just 20 seconds basically tells your body to make upgrades and make adaptations. And so we have mitochondrial biogenesis. So now you're going to have more energy. So exercise targeted in the right way. And we have a lot of metrics, right, that we use with clients. So it's like, okay, let's establish a baseline. If I want to be into my 70s and 80s and still traveling and hiking and running between airport terminals and putting my bag in the overhead locker, what needs to be true today? How strong do I need to be true today? And how fit do I need to be in terms of my aerobic fitness in order for me to have that lovely quality of life into my
Yeah.
70s and 80s and beyond. And so there's a science to it. Do you know what I mean? You actually can do it.
Well, I actually heard someone, and I wish I could remember which podcast it was. Oh, I can't remember. It could have been Diary of a CEO with, anyway. And the guest was actually talking about that with longevity, with how quick, with how fast longevity research and products and changing the way we're aging is moving, that if we make it to 80 healthy, then there's a really good chance we're going to make it to 120. Like that's going to become the norm very, very quickly. So I think that so much of this stuff is, I don't know, like for me, I want to live as long as I can possibly live, but it has to be, like you said, it has to be health span. I have to be still physically able to do all the things that I want to do. Even if I have to turn the volume down a bit, that's okay. But really being able to, I don't know, live to my maximum is really what I want to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. And you want to have that quality of life because how beautiful, right? At each life stage, there's so many incredible things that happen. And also there's this evolution of ourselves, which is beautiful, right? And we're getting to know ourselves better and getting more in touch with our own spirituality and our soul. And I think that you don't want to miss out on that or be distracted, right? By having to put up with all these physical symptoms, which actually are mostly avoidable. That's the thing we know. Most of these chronic diseases are avoidable if we've got the right nutrition, sleep, stress management, and movement dialed in. Those are the kind of 4 key pillars.
Yeah. What I think is fascinating about your work is because you talk so much about health and well-being, but you tie them so beautifully with purpose and values, and even spirituality. So, like, for you, how important is it when it comes to healthy aging and longevity to be focused on purpose?
I think it's so important. I think apart from anything else, right, it's the number one thing in terms of just your own quality of life. We only get one go at this, right? And
Yeah.
why am I here? And I think it can feel like an overwhelming question sometimes. But if you bring it down to even like, well, why am I here right now? Right? Even bringing it into the present moment, like, what am I here to do? And because we have seasons in life, and I think we feel often we need to be all things to all people at all times. We don't. Let's embrace the seasons, you know? And I think you and I, both of us, have been building businesses with children that we've been looking after. Maybe had we been at a different stage of life, we might be putting more into one area or the other, right? But having children in itself is just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And we get a relatively short period of time that we can spend with them and really enjoy it before they go and go off on their own lives, right? And then they come back and they have grandchildren. And so I would encourage everyone to think about, where am I in my life right now? And where do I want to be? And am I being present to the moments that I want to be in? Because it changes throughout and it changes across decades.
I love what you just said because it just reminds me of there's been so much of my life where I've been living in the future, like when my kids were little, I was still, well, when my first son was a baby, I was still recovering from my mental health journey. By the time my second son was born, I had started my first business. I was juggling all of this. I had a husband that was traveling half the time. As you said, I had aging parents. I had all of this stuff going on. And I was constantly living in the future. I was like, I just got to get to this point. I just got to get to this point. And just as you were speaking, it just made me think or bring awareness to the fact that now I live so much more in the now. Like I'm so much more where I'm at. My eldest son is 18 next year. He finishes school next year. So I'm very conscious that I want to hang out with him as much as he'll let me at this
That's
point.
the same as me. Mine's the same age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love just having that moment of going, because I do feel like this is one of, when I had my babies, I didn't have time to sit down and contemplate. I didn't contemplate, what's the mother I want to be. I certainly didn't contemplate who's the wife I want to be. Where I am at now in my life, the thought of, okay, well, right now I'm loving being this entrepreneur and I've spent so much time and energy contemplating, who do I want to be? What do I want to bring to the world? Like all of this sort of stuff. But as you were just speaking, I'm like, oh my God, I've even contemplated the sort of grandmother that I want to be. I want to be that grandmother that can be there for my kids. If they want me, I would love to be there looking after their babies, doing all of those things and just being able to keep up with them and to be able to consciously create that from here, from this place, I think is, yeah, it's a really powerful thing to be able to do.
It's beautiful. And I think, just it's such we've been saying all the way through, right? It's a complete reframe and just thinking, who do I want to be? I'm very much about stepping into that future version of you, right? Just constantly elevating yourself all the way through and thinking, who am I being and who do I want to be? There's an exercise. I just recently did a little like solo bite size on this that will tell you how present you're being very, very quickly, right? All of us, because I have to practice this, right? By the way, I'm just as much a work in progress as everyone else.
Yeah,
But when
we
you
all
wake
are.
up in the morning, it's a really interesting exercise is to wake up and take a really like deep breath, okay, from like diaphragmatic breathing. So often we breathe very upper chest breathing, but to really like open up our diaphragm and breathe from the bottom of the lungs up. So right from the bottom up and take this deep breath in and then let it go. And then focus on something you're grateful for to bring yourself into that beautiful energy of gratitude. And then you can set an intention for the day, right? And so it might be that I intend to be, energy, or it might be I intend to be calm, right? And you can pick a word for the day. And then as you get out of bed and your feet hit the floor and you start to go to the bathroom, try to make your mind present to where your body is. And this is the bit that will tell us all whether we really are being present to our reality. Because what's so interesting here is just try this tomorrow, right? All of
I'm
you
in.
listening, watch where the mind goes because it might not go into the bathroom with you. It might be over there thinking about something else or what you've got to do. And just that powerful moment, first thing, of really being intentional about your day and carrying that intention, because the mind is going to try and hop off somewhere else, and just bringing it
Oof.
back so you're more embodied is a really powerful exercise.
Oh my God, I love it. I'm absolutely going to do it tomorrow. And it's funny that you use this because literally 2 mornings ago, I woke up and I often will wake up and I'll give myself a big hug. And it was one of those mornings that I gave myself a big hug. I was just, I could feel the breeze coming in through the window. I was
Oh,
really
I
present.
love that.
And which was really lucky because as I got up and walked into the bathroom, I just had this intuitive sense to stop and look down. And I turned the light on, and there's a huge dog poo just sitting in front
Oh
of
no.
me.
Oh
So
my God, I've had this.
I know, right? So it was really lucky that I happened to be present that morning. It really
Yes.
worked out well for me.
And that your intuition was telling you, yeah, that could have ended up quite badly had your mind been somewhere else that morning.
Exactly. Oh, hilarious.
Oh, that's
Um,
so funny.
Selfishly, I'd love to talk to you about some of the supplements. I know because I I sometimes they say I'm fundamentally lazy, but I'm really not. I'm about simplification. You know, I see people like Dave Asprey so proud of taking 50,000 pills every day, and I'm like, there is nothing to be proud of there, mate. Like, I am not interested in drinking down 50,000 pills, especially if I can get it from my food or I can get it from swimming in the ocean or I can get it from other places. However, having said that, I do have like this fundamental core of things that I do. So I would love to start with okay, I am 49, turning 50 next year, postmenopausal. I'm really healthy and strong. I take collagen every day. I take what do I take? NMN every day. I also take resveratrol, but someone told me that that's meant to be
Yeah.
out now.
It's
So
been,
maybe we have.
disproven really in terms
Yeah,
of the longevity benefits. Yeah, there might be other
yeah,
benefits, but yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So tell me a little bit about like, okay, what are the big hitters in? And I know everyone has, we all have bio individuality, but what are kind of the big hitters in longevity for women?
Such a great question. So I think when you're looking at NMN, obviously what you're looking at there is NAD, trying to enhance NAD in the body. And I think that is definitely looking at NAD is a great place to start because that is the energy currency of life, right? That's what's helping us produce ATP. So it's really, really important. And we know that NAD levels decline by about half every 20 years. So it's a real thing. This is also affecting our energy. And so I think NAD, something that supports NAD is really good. I think with NMN, there have been concerns around taking it and having a bit of like affecting methylation too much. So balancing it with something like a methyl donor like trimethylglycine is good. The NAD that I use is actually precursors to NAD that have the salvage pathway taken care of. So there's a great scientist on this called Dr. Nicola Conlon. She's done lots and lots of research, and she's formulated a supplement that she uses called Nuchido, and she's also done biological age testing with it. And the thing about NAD is our body has a way of recycling it, and this is through the salvage pathway. And so optimizing to make sure that methylation is accounted for appropriately and that the salvage pathway, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm not a
Oh my
scientist.
God.
But
And I'm just like, can you just tell me what send me the link so I can get the exact product?
I'll send you the link afterwards, and I'll also send you. I must do another podcast with her because she's done a lot of testing now. She can prove actually the increase in NAD, but also testing the biological age. So I can send you stuff around her because she's really awesome. So that's one to think of because that supplement, and you know what's really interesting, Emma, is when I've taken that supplement and I've tried lots of different ones like NMN and things like that, is the energy that I feel is amazing. And I actually contacted her to say, what's happening with my sprint training? You know, we were talking about power
Yeah.
and feeling more powerful and actually exercising in that way. You've got what's known as max heart rate, right? Which is, as a very rough and ready guide, is 220 minus your age. There's better ways of testing it, and you can do an in-lab assessment. But I'd got to the point where I was going all out on these sprints, and now I just couldn't get any faster or harder, and I was fatiguing. And within 3 weeks of me taking that supplement, my max heart rate just increased. It was extraordinary.
Wow.
And yeah,
Oh
I
my
was at
goodness.
I got to the point now where I actually use the Carol bike for it, but which is an AI bike, because I got to the point where the treadmill can't go any faster. Do you know what I mean? It was becoming dangerous and it was on an incline. So
Wow.
that's just my personal experience with, and it helps me maintain energy. I can't prove that that's it. She just said to me, I said, have you had this result with anyone else? And she said, do you know, actually, the more athletic people that we notice that take it, because obviously there are people of all ages, have noticed that. But anyway,
Wow.
her science is amazing. She goes around the world speaking on it. So that's something to think about is for everyone is just think about NAD.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say is a combination of NAC, N-acetylcysteine, with glycine is a really good combo at night. And this helps with collagen. It helps with detoxification. It has some good science behind it in terms of longevity. But it's also helping with glutathione production, which is our body's master antioxidant. So rather than trying to take antioxidants, which actually there's some science that if you take certain antioxidants, they can be kind of inhibiting longevity, this is really helping your body produce more glutathione. And the cool thing about glycine is it also helps to cool body temperature. So anyone that is struggling with being a bit hot at night, particularly women, glycine can help with that. It also,
Wow.
if you're someone, and hopefully you have been listening to so many podcasters like myself talk about the fact that we all need more protein, right? We need, to really optimize for protein with aging, is then you can have quite a lot of methionine. And so you want to balance it out with glycine, because some of us might be having bone broth, eating meat on the bone and things like this, these collagenous cuts of meat. But if we're not, then we need to make sure we're having enough glycine. And generally, I think we make glycine because it's what's known as a conditional amino acid. So we do make some of it. Is about 5 or 6 grams a day. We need more like 10 or 12. So what I do
Wow.
is I get a big bag of glycine. And the nice thing is, for listeners, is glycine tastes sweet, but it doesn't impact your blood sugar. In fact, it has positive implications for blood sugar, or blood glucose. So I put a teaspoon in my morning smoothie. And then at night, what I love is my little nighttime ritual that I now just can't live without. When I go on holiday, I'm like, oh my God, where's the glycine and the chamomile tea? So I have chamomile tea, the kind of, the flower bags of tea. And then I put a teaspoon of glycine in it. And honestly, that in combination with some magnesium is just an incredible like sleep hack, if you like.
Wow. And then you
So
take the NAC with it as well at
I take
night.
the NAC, yeah, at night just to help alongside, and that really helps. I do think one thing I have noticed for women who are thinking about hormone therapy, progesterone. Oh my god, is a lifesaver in terms of that sleep. That's amazing. Like micronized progesterone, something like utrogestan with magnesium for women that are really struggling. That can really help. Obviously, they need to speak to their medical doctor about that. But yeah, that NAC GlyNAC combo is a great combo. The other
Amazing.
one is spermidine, which is
Oh, yeah.
made in.
Yeah,
Have
I
you
was
heard of
checking
that?
with ChatGPT. I was getting ChatGPT to go through all my stuff, and that was one of the ones that it suggested. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, spermidine. So spermidine is it's made in our guts, and we can get it from our food, wheat predominantly. But we don't make as much of it as we age. But the scientific literature is around whole food based spermidine. So if you're looking at spermidine, you want to have a look at a company that does that. The one that I take is by Primadine, Oxford Healthspan, called Primadine, which is whole food based, and they do a non-gluten option. But I think there's a lot of companies that are making synthetic spermidine. That isn't what's so far been shown in the literature, but that targets 9 out of the 12 hallmarks of aging. Many
Wow.
people, and this will be a positive thing for those that struggle, have seen reversal in grey hair with spermidine supplementation.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and actually that particular supplement, and I'm not trying to market these brands at all. I just think people need to, I would say, go and do your own research to make sure that what you're taking is validated by the scientific research, because there are
Yeah.
so many supplements out there. And I think the synthetic forms at the moment don't necessarily show the science. And so look for a supplement. I think that the ones that I'm mentioning, what's so good is that not only are they putting stuff in, they're also helping your body to produce more of this, right? Like we were talking
Yes.
about with the NAD salvage pathway, the GlyNat helping you produce. I'm very much a fan of giving your body the components it needs to do more of that work that it naturally did itself when you were younger. And
Yeah.
that's probably like a good segue in.
Oh
The
my
other thing I
God.
would say is omega 3.
Omega
Um,
3.
omega 3, and there's also more coming out about this new supplement, new fat called fatty 15. That Dr. Mark Hyman's talking a lot about that and the research. He's great in terms of following, in terms of longevity as well.
Yeah, amazing. I think I actually have him coming on the podcast at some point in the future, which is very exciting. Oh my God. So I've just got a
Very
list
exciting.
and I'm going to go to my shop, Jing Organics. For those of you in Byron, they're awesome. Go check them out. Um,
Obviously, I
the
do
other,
have to say, like anyone listening to this, supplements are very powerful. I think we underestimate the power of them, and particularly herbs and things. When we're looking at things like adaptogenic herbs, like ashwagandha, things like that, always check, with your medical doctor before taking anything, because even things like ashwagandha, yes, they can be very powerful for women. It can be very powerful for like things like hot flashes, for sleep, for relaxation, for energy, but also it impacts the serotonin pathway. And so some women actually don't respond well. So that's why I would say with any supplement, make sure you're working with a practitioner who can really help you, rather than you just going and trying to experimenting.
yeah, it's really interesting because from a human design perspective, you're a 3/6. So, and you saying like, I'm not just, promoting these brands, but as a line 3, you actually call out what doesn't work because you've tried all the different things. I'm also a line 3. So that's a lot of the reason why people come to us, because we have this experience of just as much what doesn't work as what does work. So I feel like you're just right on the money. Now, I want to ask you about CBD. Obviously it's huge in the US. People use it a lot here for many different things. But I was very like, it's a no from me. But then I started using it for, I very rarely get headaches, but I'd use it for a headache instead of using paracetamol or, sleepy gummies. Like I get like sleepy gummies that they have no THC, but for, let's say, if we're on a plane or something like that. Um, Tell me a little bit about your opinion on CBD. And also, the concern I have is that it doesn't, coming back to something you said, it doesn't actually help my body get better at sleep. It's kind of like, is it just a band-aid? And if I take it too much or we're relying on it too much, is there a downside to that?
Yeah, such a good question. I think with CBD, this probably isn't the answer necessarily people are looking for, but it's so individual. And I think that it's not something I tried it like you, and I tried different ones, and I got sent some from the US that did have like a bit of THC in it, and I personally didn't respond to it very well. I think some people do, and I think this is the thing with anything like that, and with like the adaptogens, the herbs and things, is it's really, really individual. And I'm not sure that you should be taking any of these things for like a very long period of time. I think like a lot of these things you should think about cycling on and off them as well. But I think with CBD, it's hard to say because I think people respond very, very differently. And I know that I did a podcast recently with Dr. Andrew Hill, who's a cognitive neuroscientist that does a lot with neurofeedback. And he's seeing very different things, you know, when he's looking and doing EEGs with people and doing their brain mapping, and some of the effects of even things like lion's mane he was mentioning, just things that are having different impact on people. And I think that is so bio individual,
Yeah.
that again, yeah, it's something I would definitely work with someone on. But it's
Yeah.
become very, very popular. That's the thing. I think
Yeah.
these things get a little bit more attention sometimes than maybe they should.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm super conscious of your time, but I do want to ask you about peptides because I feel like, again, something that I was like, nah, it's not really my thing. And then I gave it a go and it was really brilliant. Like, I definitely felt more energy. And I don't remember which peptides they were. This is typical Emma. I'm not good with details. But can you just tell us, A, what are peptides? What are they? Like, why are we taking them? And your opinion on whether they're a good thing or maybe not a good thing for longevity.
I think so peptides is definitely not my area of expertise. It's not something that I've really dived into too much yet. I think with peptides, I think they can do wonderful things, but I think that some of them, because they are initially got popularized in the bodybuilding industry, and I think they were being used there a lot. And I think that they can have really profound effects, right? Particularly if you're trying to heal some of them, like if you're trying to heal an injury and things like that, they're really, really amazing in terms of their effect. But there are some doctors that I could put you in touch with who I think are really good on peptides, because the one thing I would say is that you do want to worry about like some of the side effects or what you might be upregulating. I think bioregulator peptides are often safer, but I think that it's working with someone here because there's a lot of science around it who really, I would go for somebody who peptides is their thing.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of people that I can put you in touch with who really, really know the world of peptides and actually might be great in terms of doing an actual podcast, I think, for people on peptides.
Sounds
But I
amazing.
would say that it's one of those areas that is becoming more heavily regulated as well. It's quite controversial in the US at the moment, because people have been ordering things off websites. And what you don't want to do with any of these things, right, is to upgrade something in the body if there's any kind of cellular dysfunction or things that you don't want extra growth on. So I would always say, be cautious, do your research, and work with somebody who really, really knows peptides.
I love it. So I'm super conscious of your time. So, last question before I'll get you to share where everyone can find you. Is there something you think is super important for my audience to know or to hear that perhaps we haven't covered yet?
Something that's super important that we haven't covered. I think there's a couple of things. So when I talk about sort of a framework that people can get started with, and I can leave them with this, right? Because they can go away and think about, am I targeting each of these areas? Is think about, for me, high performance is about living with intention, right? And it's about being mind, body, spiritually healthy. And so how can you do that? I talk about making the shift. And the shift basically stands for the pillars so that you can use this very easily. So, first one is sleep. The second one is hormones. And by hormones, I don't just mean your sex hormones, which we've touched on, but also your metabolic hormones, like we were talking about, insulin and a range of others, your stress hormones, cortisol. So thinking about are my hormones in balance? Because your hormones really dictate how you feel as well as your health. And then the middle pillar is insights. So what insights am I gathering, right? So this could be through lab work, but also through wearables, for example, or even through journaling. Like, we can learn so much. I mean, when they do sleep studies and they compare people doing a 28-day subjective sleep assessment, it becomes as pretty much as valuable, right, as actually sleep tracking data in terms of the wearables we have at the moment. So getting insights, asking yourself questions, journaling, all of the wonderful things that you talk about, Emma, getting in touch with you, that inner you, that's the core central piece. And then the F is about fueling. We haven't had time today, right? We could go into so much about how do we fuel our bodies from a nutritional perspective. There's so much there. But when you think about fueling, use the acronym FLOW, because we don't just get energy from our food. And FLOW stands for food, light, oxygen, and water. We touched a little bit on breath work. Hydration's really, really important, but light is another world on its own, right? And getting access to morning sunlight, restricting light at night, really getting that circadian alignment ties back in with sleep. And we get so much energy from light, not just vitamin D synthesis, right? But the infrared, about 49% of the sun's spectrum of rays, even in the middle of the day, is infrared. And this is healing energy. So it's really important. And red light and near infrared charges our mitochondria. And with so much water, this makes a difference, right? It changes the water structure and things in our cells. So that's really important. And then the last thing, the T, is how am I training my body and my mind? And that's where I fell down, right? I was actually quite fit as a lawyer. And I ate well, I exercised, but I really wasn't in touch with that. And we've talked about it so much. You can probably tell how important it is to me. But, yes, reprogramming your subconscious mind in the direction of your goals and dreams, like putting yourself first, but also getting in touch with your spirituality, using the exercise we went through in the morning to bring yourself into the present moment. So that's like, how can I make the shift? And then we have a resource, if your listeners want it, where they can actually do a questionnaire and score themselves on Shift. And those questions actually are powerful questions in terms of like, am I doing the habits and behaviors that lower my biological age, give me more energy, give me that health for high performance, and get me in touch with the inner me? And we'll send you a free personalized report with it.
Oh my God, that's so exciting. So we will make sure that is in the show notes. And I think it's fascinating, isn't it, now that we live in this time that we're really seeing the results of understanding the connection between our mind, our mindset, what we think, this understanding that we are not our thoughts, we're the thinker of our thoughts, and how much impact that actually has on the results that we have in our physical body. I think we just live in an amazing time, and we're going to see so many things that seem miraculous to us unfold, especially in the longevity space, I really feel.
Yeah, I do too. And it's exciting times, isn't it? That's the thing, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that was the thing I learned through my experience with health. And just what you're saying there, right, is that we have the power within us to create our lives on purpose. And it just takes a little bit of that intention in order to do it, but it's so worth it. And I love all the beautiful work you're doing, Emma. It's just amazing. And I know that when you were on my show, it was super, super popular. And I was saying to you offline just how much my audience want to connect with you. So yeah, really amazing. And just thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And for those listening, Angela and I were talking about maybe in the future doing some sort of retreat together. So keep an ear out for that, because it just might happen near you, because, we're at each ends of the planet. So we'll have to find somewhere in between. Okay, Angela, so where can people find you? Social media, website, podcast?
Thank you, Emma. Yeah, stay tuned. It will be fun, definitely be fun to do something together. So the podcast is High Performance Health. So yeah, come and check us out over there. I'm most active on Instagram at the moment. That is Angela S. Foster. And then if you want to go and do the quiz and get a free snapshot of your health, then that is at yourtotalhealthcheck.com. And then my main website is Angela Foster Performance. You can find everything on there as well.
Oh my goodness, amazing. I'm absolutely going to go and do the quiz. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for being with me. I could have literally spoken to you for hours. So yeah, expect a catch-up invite coming your way, because I'm so curious to talk to you more. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us for this conversation. I trust you got what you needed from today's episode, and I so look forward to having you on the next one. Bye for now. Thanks everyone for being here all the way to the end of the podcast. I hope you got lots of value out of it. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. Could I please ask that you share this podcast with friends if you found it valuable? And also, bonus points, could you leave a review for me as well on Apple? It would be greatly appreciated. If at any point you would like to be on the podcast or you've got questions that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, by all means get on my socials and DM me. Everything you need is there in the show notes. Have an awesome day. Bye for now.